Nicole Kidman did not pause when she saw the photograph. She did not reach for a water glass or turn to Jimmy or wait for someone to tell her what to do. She stood from her chair, stepped off the edge of the stage without looking down, and moved into the audience. Not backstage, not the wings, into the crowd itself, moving along the row with both hands on the seat backs the way you move through a space when you are not looking at the space, scanning each face as she passed. Until she stopped 4 rows in and 6 seats from the aisle, and did not move again. The cameras followed her all the way. The studio was completely silent, and Jimmy Fallon, standing at the edge of the stage where she had just been, could not produce a single word. It was a Monday evening in October 2024. The Tonight Show had cleared the full hour for Nicole Kidman. No second guest, no cold open. Just an evening built around a conversation that Jimmy had been told. And the week leading up to the taping was going to be different from the ones that came before. The audience that night arrived early and sat quietly. People who had been watching Nicole Kidman since Dead Calm, who had seen everything she had made across 3 decades, who came because they regarded her with something closer to reverence than fandom. Several people had flown from Sydney. The show's head of talent, who had spent 18 years in live television, said afterward that she had never been given a pre-show briefing quite like the one she received from Nicole's team the week before. Jimmy had been asked to do one thing at approximately the halfway point of the interview: put a photograph on the screen and say nothing else. The first part of the conversation had moved through Nicole's early career, her childhood in North Sydney, the particular quality of growing up very tall and very self-conscious in Australia in the 1970s. Jimmy had produced a series of archival photographs, school portraits, early headshots, a backstage photo from a Sydney theatre production in 1982. Nicole had narrated each one with ease, the way you narrate things that happened to someone you used to be. Then Jimmy put the 4th photograph on the screen. Not a famous image. Not professionally composed, not something anyone in that room had seen before. Just a group photograph, slightly grainy, the contrast of something developed in a small lab somewhere in 1977. Children in a community arts hall in North Sydney. And in the far right of the frame, looking directly into the camera with the ease of someone completely at home in rooms like that, a woman in her early 30s, with her hands resting on the shoulders of the 2 smallest children at the front. Nicole looked at the screen. Her head moved forward by an inch, both hands lifted from the arms of her chair and pressed flat on the desk in front of her. The warmth she had been carrying through the entire first half of the interview left her expression in the space of about 3 seconds. Jimmy said, very quietly, "Nicole, you all right?" She did not answer. The entire studio froze. 300 people held their breath. The roots stopped moving. Questlove's sticks came to rest on the rim of the snare drum and stayed there. Jimmy leaned forward. Nicole was looking at the face in the far right of the photograph. The woman in her early 30s, hands on the shoulders of the 2 smallest children, looking directly at the camera. And her expression had become something that does not usually appear on live television. The wrong assumptions formed immediately. This was someone who had passed away, a painful memory, something in the research that should not have been included. And then Nicole Kidman stood from her chair, stepped off the edge of the stage, and walked into the audience. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by her lapel microphone as she stepped down. Midge. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1977. Nicole Kidman wasn't always Nicole Kidman, Oscar winner, icon, one of the most celebrated performers of her generation. In 1977, she was 10 years old, and she did not yet know where she was supposed to go. In the autumn of 1977, Nicole Kidman was 10 years old and living with her family in Longville, on the north shore of Sydney, in a house where books covered most of the flat surfaces, and the children were expected to think carefully about who they were becoming. Her father, Anthony, was a biochemist. Her mother, Janelle, taught nursing. Nicole was already tall, noticeably, unavoidably tall for her age, the kind of height that other children name immediately and that adults comment on without understanding how it lands. She had been to 2 different ballet classes by that point, and had been told, in 2 different ways, that her proportions were not what the form required. She was quiet about this in the way children are quiet about things that have settled somewhere inside them. She was looking, without knowing she was looking, for somewhere her body was not a problem to be solved. Agnes Hartley. Midge, always Midge, since her first day of school, was 32 years old that autumn and running a movement and theater program at a community arts center off Miller Street in North Sydney. She had trained as a dancer herself, had worked seriously at it until her late 20s, and had put everything she had learned into teaching. Her classes were not audition preparation, not rankings or assessments. She had watched too many children be told their bodies were the wrong shape, and she had decided her program would be the one room where that sentence was never spoken. She charged what families could manage. The center was half empty most days. She taught because she needed to, and because occasionally a child walked in who needed exactly what she was offering and had not found it anywhere else. Nicole came on a Thursday afternoon in March, brought by her mother, who had heard about the classes from another mother at school. She stood in the doorway of the arts hall in a yellow cardigan, with her hands in her pockets, and did not come further in. Midge crossed the room and stood beside her and said, "Without preamble, you can just watch today if you want." Nicole watched for 20 minutes from the edge of the room. Then, she was on the floor with the other children. And then, she was the child the other children were watching. Midge had been teaching long enough to know what she was looking at immediately. Not raw talent in the performative sense, but something more specific and more rare. A child who expanded when given permission to move, who became completely herself in motion, who took up exactly the space she was meant to take up, which was considerable, which had been presented to her as a problem everywhere she had been, and which Midge understood was not a problem at all. After the class, while the other children collected coats and shoes, Midge took a small index card from the table by the door and wrote 4 words on it. She pressed it into Nicole's hand on the way out. For next week, she told her. Nicole, read it on the walk home. The stage was made for you. She kept going to the Thursday classes for 2 years, until the Arts Center's funding was cut and the program ended without ceremony. She never forgot Midge's name. She mentioned her briefly in an Australian interview in 2001 that the journalist did not follow up on. The index card traveled with her from Sydney to Los Angeles, to London, to Nashville, to wherever she was living, in a small leather case she had carried since the early years of her career. It had been there for 47 years when she walked into Studio 6B. Midge Hartley was 79 years old now, living with her daughter Colleen in a flat in Cremorne, on the north side of Sydney Harbour. She had taught movement and theatre for 4 decades. She had retired at 72, when her knees made that decision for her. Then, 7 months ago, the scans came back. Stage 4. 6 months, maybe less. Colleen had been at every appointment. 3 weeks after the diagnosis, Midge told Colleen there was one thing she wanted. A message went to the Tonight Show's international team. Nicole Kidman's response came back within 18 hours. No conditions, no requests. Her only instruction to the production team was this: I want her to feel like a person, not a moment. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Behind the scenes, Nicole Kidman had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. She had asked for Midge to be seated in row 4 of the audience, not backstage, not in the wings, because she wanted the moment to happen where everyone could witness it. What she had in the inside pocket of her jacket, she had not mentioned to a single member of the production team. But this is the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Back in the present, Nicole already in the audience, moving through the row with her hands on the seatbacks, the photograph still glowing on the screen above the empty guest chair. A 79-year-old woman with stage 4 cancer is sitting in the 4th row of The Tonight Show, and she has not moved since she saw Nicole Kidman step off that stage. Midge Hartley had handed a 10-year-old an index card in a doorway in North Sydney in 1977 and said for next week, and had not known, not once across 47 years, where that card had gone. She had watched Nicole become Nicole from the other side of the world, without ever saying a word about the Thursday classes on Miller Street. And Nicole was 4 rows away. Nicole reached her without stopping. The people seated between the aisle and Midge pressed back to make room, and Nicole moved past them without looking away from Midge, who had not stood. Her knees did not allow for standing quickly, and who was sitting with both hands folded in her lap, watching Nicole Kidman come toward her the way you watch something you have spent a long time not expecting. Nicole knelt in the aisle beside her chair. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. The distance between them was about 2 feet. Jimmy Fallon had not spoken since Nicole stepped off the stage. He was standing at the stage's edge looking down at row 4. He said, very quietly, folks, I think we need to let this happen. And then, he said nothing more. Questlove stood from behind his drum kit. The director did not cut to commercial. The cameraman who had followed Nicole into the rows did not pull back 1 inch. Nicole reached into the inside pocket of her jacket and took out a small index card. It was soft with age, yellowed at the edges. The handwriting on it faded to the color of old paper that has been handled many times. She held it in both hands and turned it toward Midge. Midge looked at it. A sound came out of her that was not quite a word. You kept it, Midge said. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but caught perfectly by the boom microphone hovering just above the row. Every house, Nicole said. Every city. It was always in the case. Midge reached out and touched the edge of the card with 1 finger, very lightly, the way you touch something you thought was gone. I wrote that in 30 seconds, she said. I know that now, Nicole said. I thought it took you longer. Midge looked at her. You were standing in the doorway, she said. You wouldn't come in. You came to the door, Nicole said. You didn't wait for me. Midge took Nicole's hand, not the one holding the card, and held it with both of hers. The shaking was visible from several rows back. The stage was made for you, she said. I knew it the first Thursday. Nicole looked at her for a long moment. I know, she said. I've known since I read it. Jimmy had come down the stage steps and was standing at the entrance to the row, not between them, just close. His hand was over his mouth. He was watching the way you watch something you will carry for a long time. The standing ovation began exactly where they were, in the 4th row, from the people who had pressed back to let Nicole through and moved outward in every direction at once, the way a wave moves when it starts at the center and has nowhere to go but out. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Agnes Hartley passed away 11 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning in January, at Colleen's home in Cremorne. She was 79 years old. The index card was on the nightstand in a small frame Colleen had made room for on the shelf. Midge had not asked her to take it out. The memorial was held at a community arts center in North Sydney, 2 streets from where the Thursday classes had been. Colleen said her mother had watched the clip from The Tonight Show most evenings in her final weeks, always starting from the same place, the moment Nicole stepped off the stage. She never watched all the way to the end. She always stopped when Nicole knelt in the aisle. Colleen asked her once why she stopped there. Midge said, "That's where it finishes for me. The rest is for everyone else." The index card was sent to Nicole after the service. It went back into the leather case. Some people open a door for 30 seconds and hold it open for a lifetime.